This video was brought to you by CuriosityStream. With Europe's energy crisis continuing to brew, the pressures on national economies in the bloc are continuing to grow. So much so that the euro has recently dropped below parity and hit a 20-year low. So in this video, we're going to be taking a look at why the euro is collapsing in value and whether it even matters. If you like our videos, then be sure to subscribe, because we're so close to 500,000. Thank you so much. First things first, what's happened? Well, the euro dropping below parity, i.e. €1 buying less than $1, is very rare. Before this summer, the euro was last at parity in December 2002, just a year after euro notes and coins were first introduced. Now, there's one major reason why the euro is so weak at the moment, and that's the impending recession. That's because there's a general consensus around the economic and political world that a recession in Europe is basically inevitable, if one hasn't started already. The only real question being the depth and severity of said recession. Now, the threat of that recession has forced investors to chase other areas for returns on their investors and has decimated business and consumer confidence across the continent. The IFO Business Climate Index, the headline index for business confidence in Germany, has suffered a precipitous fall in recent weeks and months. And on a broader level, S&P's Global Purchasing Managers Index, or SMI, a key indicator of economic health throughout the euro area, found an 18-month low of 48.9% in August, with anything below the 50% mark designating a contraction. In fact, analysts at Nomura are so pessimistic that they predicted back in July that if Nord Stream doesn't resume operations, we think that 90 cents is a growing possibility over the winter. A scenario where the euro area has to ration gas supplies to industry. If that's not an economic crisis, what is it? And since that statement was made, Nord Stream 1 has indeed come offline indefinitely. Added to that issue, the US currency, the dollar, is for many the world's reserve currency. And as such, when worst comes to worst, investors flock to the dollar because it's considered to be one of the safest currencies in the world. This is largely because the US borrows in a currency it controls, unlike EU member states, as well as the fact that currently the US economy is far more resilient than the European one. Now, while inflation is a concern for the US, they're just not facing the same degree of cost of living crisis or fuel squeeze as the EU. And that's simply because the US isn't as reliant on imported fuel as Europe is. In fact, since 2019, the US has been a net total energy exporter. All in all, meaning that the US, and by extension the US economy, is in a far stronger position. Now, in response to people leaving the euro and flocking to the dollar, the ECB has hiked interest rates as a way to boost the value of the euro and get it back above parity. Now, this makes sense from a macroeconomic point of view, because loosely speaking, when interest rates in a country or set of countries are raised, more and more people want to save to benefit from the higher interest rate. The problem being that to benefit from that higher interest rate, you need to put your cash in the banks in those countries, in the local currency. So in this case, European banks in the form of euros. Therefore, the increased demand for savings in European banks leads to an increased demand for euros, which in turn should make the euro stronger. So if the ECB is taking this sensible strategy and hiking interest rates to the highest rate on record, then why is the euro still so weak? The answer, the US Federal Reserve. Now, increases in interest rates ought to attract cash and capital to a country, but it's not necessarily the absolute value that matters. It's relative. And while the ECB is hiking interest rates, it's doing so at a much, much slower pace and starting from a much, much lower level than its British and American counterparts. For example, the Federal Reserve in the US has raised its interest rate, known as the federal funds rate, from 0.25% at the beginning of the year to 2.5% in July, while the Bank of England raised theirs from 0.25% at the beginning of the year to 1.75% today. By contrast, the ECB raised its deposit facility rate from negative 0.5%, a figure that's had in place since 2019, to just 0.75%. Now, obviously, each area faces different economic conditions, requiring more or less monetary tightening, i.e. the raising of interest rates. But the issue is that if someone wants to maximize returns at the moment, then they'll flood over to the US, which has the highest rates. And that means that capital will be flowing out of the EU and into the US, with the sale of euros and purchase of dollars, which has, in reality, further depressed the value of the euro vis-a-vis other currencies. So that's why it's happening. But does the collapse of the euro actually matter? Well, it depends where you're looking from. Let's start with the basics though, how it affects you and me. Now, if you're a European living and working within the euro area, then you won't feel any first round effects of the collapse. We'll come back to the second round in a moment though. That is until you go abroad, or otherwise try and buy or sell something from outside the euro area. The general rule being that a strong euro, i.e. one that can buy a lot of other currencies, such as the dollar, leads to imports being cheaper, while exports become less competitive. In real terms, what that means is that Europeans going on holiday at the moment will see their cash go a lot less far than before. And on a broader economy-wide scale, the same logic follows, just on a bigger scale. That's because each European citizen will see the costs of goods and services priced in US dollars increase, and as such, they're likely to cut back on them, meaning that, in the figures, imports will likely decrease, with domestic producers getting a bit of a boost as European goods now look more competitive when compared to imported goods. The problem here is that there sometimes just isn't a suitable domestic alternative, and even when there is, it's still sometimes going to cost more. All in all, adding to more inflation at potentially the worst possible time for the bloc. Studies cited by the European Central Bank, the people responsible for keeping inflation in check, suggest that a 1% depreciation in the exchange rate raises inflation by 0.1% over the course of 1 year and 0.25% over 3 years. As such, the 12% slump against the dollar would point towards inflation being 1.2 percentage points higher over the course of a year and 4 percentage points higher over the course of the next 3 years. And when the target is broadly 2%, that's not exactly ideal. But in any case, whether this even matters and how the ECB will actually respond is anyone's guess at the moment. But if you can't wait to find out and you want more TLDR right now, then you can find exclusive TLDR content only on Nebula. That's a streaming service we made with our creator friends, and where you can find a whole bunch of TLDR videos, which will never make it to YouTube. You can also find a ton of our other videos there ad-free, and get some of our videos early before anyone else. Signing up also really helps the channel, and helps us make more content, not just for Nebula subscribers, but for everyone else too. So if you want more from us and support the channel, then you can get access to Nebula for less than $15 a year with the Nebula Curiosity Stream bundle. Let me explain. We've partnered with the superb streaming service Curiosity Stream, where you can find a bunch of great documentaries about all kinds of fascinating topics. Now, if you sign up to their service today using our link, then you'll get Nebula included absolutely free. That's both streaming services for less than $1 a month. A crazy good deal to get all of these documentaries on Curiosity Stream and more from TLDR on Nebula. If you're interested, then the link is in the description. And thanks so much for your support.